Hi, everybody. Welcome to our US Reps webinar today. Super excited about this topic. It's from certification to success, building a sustainable career in fitness and wellness. We're going to have a candid conversation that goes beyond just the textbook and looking to talk to our professionals, our panel today, and what does it mean to go from I'm minimally competent to growing and thriving in your career. So we're just going to really explore kind of their own personal journeys, those that they prepare in advancing their careers, and kind of where do they see the industry is going ahead. Today we have three or top panelists. Kathleen Ferguson, founder and CEO of Coach 360. She has 14 years of experience. She's been a leader in health, fitness, and wellness industry, working with major brands across different business areas. She's recently founded Coach 360 to fill a gap that she saw in the market, providing education and support for the coaching community. She's also a pioneer in raising awareness for women's health and within the industry. Geraldine Coopersmith, she's a senior director of personal training experience at EOS Fitness. She's a 30-year veteran with a respected leader. She's served in roles at companies like Equinox and Exos. As the current role as the senior director of personal training experience at EOS, focused on professional development for thousands of personal trainers. Geraldine's insights are a product, extensive experience and master's degree in exercise science from Columbia University. And then rounding out our esteemed panels, Trisha Madden, a co-founder of FitPro Programming, a 30-year veteran of the fitness industry. Trisha was named the Fitness Ideas Fitness Leader of the Year in 2020, co-founder of FitPro Programming and co-creator of Bar Above, and is known for her warm, motivating approach, and especially with beginners and aging populations. So welcome to our panel. If you have any questions, please add them to the Q&A function on the bottom. I'll answer that at the end for 15 minutes. At the end, we have allocated for Q&A, and then look to get started. So let's start with the first question to our panel. What inspired you to pursue a career in health fitness, and how did certification play a role in that? Let's see. We'll start with Trisha first.
For having me. I appreciate it so much, and I'm honored to be here. So thank you again for all of you that are listening now and listening in the near future. I would say, for me, the motivation there were two sides for me. I was a dancer until I was 19 years old and was a little bit unceremoniously ousted from the potential of a teaching or a dancing career. And so I was just really lucky at the time to come across Carrie Anderson here in Seattle, Washington, who, just is probably one of the best there ever is in our industry in terms of cueing and coaching. And she really just mentored me there from the very beginning. So I started teaching when I was about 19. I also had a sister who had debilitating health issues. She was severely anorexic, and I sort of spent much of my childhood living in a hospital, taking care of her. And then suddenly in high school, both of my fathers passed from heart attacks. So it was kind of the culmination of coming out of high school, having all these sort of tough health things come across my table in life, and just knowing that I needed to do something that would make exercise and nutrition a positive part of people's lives, not something that causes harm. And so that's sort of always been my big motivation. And then just being able to work with Carrie kind of led me to a place of like up leveling and wanting this to be my career pathway. So a little bit of everything.
Awesome. Geraldine.
Yeah. So first of all, same, I'm really excited to be here, and thank you all for tuning in. I appreciate it. And this is a great group to be a part of. I was initially not sure what I wanted to do. My undergraduate degree is in psychology. And if you have an undergraduate degree in psychology, you know that you can't really do anything with it. You have to get an advanced degree. And at that point, I had decided I really wasn't sure that I wanted psychology, but I was that far along into my studies. And I ended up going into advertising and public relations. And so the first couple years out of school, I was in these two different agencies mainly. And I was doing really well, actually, and making a lot of money and on a good career path. And I found that I was really unhappy. And I knew something had to change when I got a new job went to this great agency that everyone thought was the next big thing. And my first thought when I walked in is, how long do you have to work before you can retire? Well, that's probably not good. He just got here today. So I started reading, and I read a book called Do What You Love, The Money Will Follow. And at that point, I spent a lot of time in the gym. I was a real gym rat, took a lot of classes, went to Molly Fox in New York City pretty much every day. And I thought, wow, if I could get paid to do that, that would be amazing. And so that set me on this path, and I've never regretted it. It was 30 years career that's been really, really good to me. And the moment I knew that certification had to be a part of it, I mean, back in those days, there was no roadmap, and I thought somebody's got to give me some guidance. So I started seeking out certification just as a way so that I would feel safe and comfortable in what I was going to do with people, because I knew what I could handle, but I had a feeling that a lot of my clients, it would not be appropriate for them. So very grateful for all those twists and turns, because they led me to this moment here.
Awesome. Kathleen.
Yeah, so I got into the fitness industry at a really kind of fork in the road moment in my life. I had lost my first husband in my 20s, and I returned back to work after a period of time, and I just felt very devoid of purpose in my life. And I wanted to do something to help people on their journeys to health and wellness. And I wanted to be that person that could be at the front lines of preventable chronic disease and the obesity epidemic. And I didn't really know how to channel that pain into purpose until I found fitness. And for me, fitness really became kind of my own, kind of personal beacon of hope. And I decided, okay, well, I'm going to become certified. And to Geraldine's point, it was really difficult as a new fitness professional to figure out the business side of it and to think of yourself as an entrepreneur. And certification for me, really represented that first step into the industry, into the profession, with, of course, some confusion to follow. But I really consider fitness something that changed the trajectory of my life in a really positive way.
That's awesome. Love hearing the kind of getting into the industry for your sense of purpose. And this just sounds like that's a thread that goes along for all three of you. And it's a lot of those that I speak with in the industry. It's just like that's a culminating event. I guess the question I think for you all, I think a lot of folks, especially young rising professionals, they think certification, that's the end point. And I think the reality is it's like that's just really the beginning. And so I guess what was the moment, and I'll leave it to any of you who wants to answer this, is like, what was the moment you're like, you know what? Yes, I'm certified. It made me give me some sense of comfort that I'm like, okay, I feel safe enough. And when you realize like, that's not enough. What was that moment? And kind of if you can describe that. And I'll leave it to any of you who want to answer that.
I can jump in with this one because I feel like it was one of those moments where I was teaching a class and a woman walked in. I attained my group fitness certification. I had, sat in Carrie's classes along with her team's classes. I had learned to teach. I had learned to coach. I had learned to cue. And a woman walks in, and she was like 6 months pregnant. And even though, there was a chapter in my certification about that, I was paralyzed with fear of harming her in some way. And that was the first time I realized I am going to spend my entire career path learning all the time, which that's why you see me at conferences. That's why you see me, constantly attending any sort of education I can get my hands on, going through different certifications, learning all the time. But the first time you feel like somebody walks into your space and you don't know how to serve them and you're not confident, I think that's a big turning point and an important step. And it's not a failure, it's just a step in the process.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I can echo that. I don't know that it was one single moment for me, but it was within a very short span of time of post-certification, being a full-time personal trainer at that point. And to Trisha's point, literally every week somebody new would come in with something that I had not been exposed to. I have Parkinson's, I'm pregnant, I have rheumatoid arthritis, and so as much as some of these things were covered in certifications, and to Trisha's point, maybe it was a couple of chapters or a page or two. We had to go way deeper, and it just, as much as you learned, there was always this vast amount of knowledge ahead of you as new clients come into your life and you want to serve them and you don't have all the information. So you realize it's a journey, which is kind of the great news, is that you're always a student and you always have this expansive experience as a personal trainer. You're not, it never gets boring because you're always taking on the next challenge, learning more competencies. So yeah, it became pretty apparent within the first couple of weeks of being a full-time trainer.
I would say too, just to add on, my aha moment really happened when I created my own mobile training business after my certification. And I came across a client who hired me on that had MS. And it really scared me because I didn't want to further injure her. And so what I had learned was that I had to dive deep and invest in education. This is just echoing what you both just said, Trisha and Geraldine, is that investing in yourself, investing in your education constantly is, it's so important to becoming a well-rounded fitness professional and being able to serve your clients in a safe and, being within scope of practice too. And that really actually drove me into, doing a lot of research and figuring out that, TRX was a great way to minimize load and could be really helpful with some of our clients that had MS. So I ended up getting TRX certified. So just continuing to learn and grow and investing in yourself. As we have these different kind of special populations or different types of clients with various different needs, because everybody is so unique that comes to you. You want to, really make sure that their safety is of paramount importance. And that requires just continuous education.
Absolutely. So from our industry, like at least in the testing industry, when you think about certifications, well, I don't think a lot of people like knowing the term, but this is just generally across occupational credentialing is when you're certified, that means you're minimally competent. So when you're thinking about that, it's just like it gets you to the starting line. It ensures to the public, provides us reasonable assurance that they're safe and effective, but that doesn't mean you're going to be successful. So when we're thinking about hiring folks or mentoring kind of young professionals, what are the knowledge, skills, or abilities, sometimes those are called competencies, that go beyond just a certification? Like, yes, you know how to design a basic program, you know how to review, or like if somebody's doing an exercise, are they doing it safely? What are those things between, yes, you got to the starting line, to those kind of other skills, maybe those intangibles, that the professionals that you see that you're just like going to be successful? Like what's the magic sauce?
I'll hop in here on this one because this one really resonates with me. I ended up moving out of the training space, about a year into, being a personal trainer, and I moved over to IDEA. And, there were a lot of skills that crossed over because, one of the things that you really have to think about when working with clients in the health and fitness industry in general is to think about the long term and, really lean into building and mastering your soft skills. This is not a transactional business. This is about relationships. If you're in the business of health and fitness, you're in the business of people and relationships. So, I always talk to people in this industry who are coming in about, making sure that, they're not just looking to make a sale, with a new client, that they're actually looking to build a relationship and deliver long-term results, because this is about the long game. So that would be the big thing that, I would recommend there.
And, I think one of the things that when we lead educations for group fitness instructors that we spend a lot of time on is the experience. It is a skill set to make people feel empowered in a space like we create. So in a gym, in a studio, it is a true skill to have somebody walk in who's never taken a class before and leave feeling that sense of success, even if they only got 2 of the moves correctly. Can you help somebody fall in love with fitness? And that is a skill set that you can't necessarily teach. There has to be something in you as a fitness professional that wants to help humans. And from that, there's this skill that comes where you start to help people, not just find a class or find a trainer, how you help them find wellness as a whole. And then of course they become your client for life. But we try to spend as much time on how you can create an experience and how you leave people feeling versus, sometimes focusing so much on the exercise.
I love that and agreed to everything that's been said. And in a similar vein, I think the most successful people at EOS, we have a phrase that I wish I knew before because I think it really nails it. We say we hire people who are hungry, humble, and smart. So you have this passion, this drive, and you're also, you have this humility, and you're willing to put the brain power in to know what you know, and more importantly, know what you don't know, because that's always a vast body of knowledge. I remember I went to graduate school eventually for exercise science, and I remember I thought I was all that because I had multiple certifications, and I walked in the first day and I realized there was this whole body of knowledge I had never even heard of. And it's like, it's just like layers of the onion you just didn't even know were there. So kind of it's very powerful. You have an emotionally intelligent person, you can teach them pretty much anything. If they care about people, they want to learn, and they have the humility to know that they don't know everything yet.
So now I'm gonna put my little hat on, because if I'm applying for a job for to work with any of you, and I'm just totally gonna ask this because I'm just personally curious, how would you even address that in an interview when you're talking about emotional intelligence? They're a great communicator. Everyone writes they're a great communicator in their resume, or they're adaptable, or they're resilient. Like, how do you ask that type of question in your interview to go like, you know what, maybe this is the person I want to tease it out a little bit, and to see if I'm getting the right person. Like, how do you go about doing that?
They're usually situational questions, like tell me about a time where, and if someone doesn't have a lot of experience in the field, they could be about their life, but you're looking to hear how they navigated tricky emotional experiences and interactions. And you're also looking for something that feels truthful. When you hear someone sort of gloss over what you sense probably had to be difficult, it's a little bit repellent, maybe too strong of a word, because you feel they're not being honest about the whole person, warts and all. We don't expect anyone to be perfect coming into this, and it's that humility to know that we make mistakes and we make them often, and then we learn from them. I think, but if you ask those questions and you're listening for that, you can see if that person has that humility and that self-awareness, and you can coach a lot with that.
Awesome.
I would just add to that in terms of group fitness, I have to see someone teach. And that's just a big part of in group fitness. To your point, how do you understand if they're really authentic in their classes, or, when they teach a yoga class, what are they really like? So I require auditions, whether there's somebody who's a program specialist for our company, or if I'm hiring for another brand. Even when I work a lot in production and we've done castings, I've gone down to LA for 4 days and done nothing but take classes and just secret shop the entire time. And really what I would see on their socials and what I would see on their applications versus what I saw in person didn't always align. And I've learned so much in that process that you really get a sense of who they are. And there were a lot of people that didn't even make it to invited castings because they didn't have that it factor, that true passion for helping humans live better lives. It would be pretty obvious.
I want to follow up with that on what you think about that in terms of personal branding. Well, I'll push that a little bit later. But I'm very interested in the disconnect between your social presence and then your in-person presence. Kathleen.
Yeah, so while I'm not hiring, personal trainers and fitness professionals directly, I was thinking about when you were talking about the audition process, Trisha. I was thinking about when I was working for a startup called Vertio, and we were hiring on-camera fitness professionals. And I'll never forget just that you want that authenticity. You want to know their why. You want to know, how are they with their friends? How can they connect with people? Because again, people business. And I'll never forget one woman who was incredible. I talked to her on the phone for over an hour. She came in and she gave me the most stale audition. And, I was just I stopped her and I said, all right, let's stop right there. I want you to tell me about what you like to do on the weekend. And this girl completely lit up. It was like she was a different person. And then I said, all right, now go. Then we could see the personality. Then we could see the authenticity and how she can connect with people. Because ultimately, you want to hire those individuals, those qualified fitness professionals. To Geraldine's point, so many things can be taught, but the ability to connect with others is an intangible, and not everybody has that it factor. So, I think, just echoing what you both just said, Geraldine and Trisha, really great points. And, that ability to connect for me is key.
So I think the next question, I think this is a tough one. I think when we're thinking about hiring new certified pros, and especially for those who are just getting started, what gaps do you see in those who aren't successful? Like, you come in, you may be fit, you may have a good personality, but you just don't, they can only get like a year or two into it. Like, what are those gaps? You're like, gosh, if you would have addressed this from the beginning, you would have maybe connected more deeply, or you would have had greater long-term longevity in this field. What is that kind of like? What are those knowledge, skills, or ability gaps you're seeing when you hire for somebody? And is it different today than it was, like, say, 5, 10 years ago?
So I could jump on this one. I don't know that necessarily the gaps are coming from the new fitness professionals coming in. I think the gaps and the problem, I guess, and why people are churning out 80% within 2 years' time from the industry, I think they come from the fact that a lot of the facilities and organizations that are hiring them on don't help to nurture and create clear career pathways. My thought is that we need more mentorship coming from leadership within these facilities and organizations, saying, okay, Francis, what is your 3-5 year plan? What does that look like? What are your goals? If you can establish the end point, then you can create the journey for that new fitness professional who, is just coming into the industry. They might be, 18, 19, 20 years old. You can help them to kind of have that journey within the industry and stay, because they understand how to get to the end point. It is so confusing for these fitness professionals coming in, these brand new professionals who they get the certification, they come in with so much passion, but they don't have the business acumen and the practical skills to succeed and thrive. So I really feel like, it's the gaps are coming from above, and we need to, as an industry, come together and better nurture these people, because they want to help, they want to be here, but it's how do we get them to stay? And we need to help them to develop those skills.
I'd love to add on to that. And I'm, of course, speaking from a group fitness perspective. What I see now more often, and I just met with an instructor who had all these questions last week, but the studio instructor, so an instructor who goes to work for a particular brand and is typically one or maybe two modalities, they come into the funnel of group fitness professional in a very different way than maybe all of us did, right? We had our group fitness certification, then we moved into the audition process. What happens in the studio side of things sometimes isn't beneficial to the instructor long-term. It's a short-term solve for the studios. They bring an instructor in, they teach them the modality, they teach them their why. They have them sign NDAs in most cases that they cannot work outside of that space. They then don't have continuing education requirements. And many of these instructors then don't have a national accreditation to go on and teach anywhere else. So then the instructor comes to them a year later and says, listen, I'm teaching a Pilates class and it's $50 a class for the consumer and I'm making 30. Well, the instructor's locked in. So now they're teaching, 10 times a week, making, really not a fair wage compared to the revenue that's being generated, but they cannot go anywhere because they don't have the skill set to go to any other space and they don't have the accreditation to even apply. And that's when they leave. And I can tell you, I've seen so many instructors get turned through a modality and they never teach again. And they say something like, oh yeah, I used to teach bar. It was a 2-year stint. I'm out. I'm like, wait, there's so much there. So we can't bring people into the funnel, put blinders on them and say, don't look around if we want them to be a part of the industry forever. And that, to your point, Kathleen, is about leadership. And even though it benefits a studio to have instructors who are really focused just on their brand and what they do, as leaders, don't we want people to stay in this industry and grow and adapt even if they leave us? And it's just, I see it often right now, and it's sad.
Yeah, agreed to everything that's been said. I think that's all spot on. I would add to that that business is a huge gap that I see, and a lack of understanding of just basic business concepts, and a bit of a repulsion about the idea of sales. So we've started talking about client acquisition. Sales isn't a dirty word. If we want to help people, we have to sell them on the idea of our services and get their buy-in and get their commitment. And so I think a lot of trainers have this sort of, that's what corporate deals with. I don't want to know from that sales business. And we're really intentional about trying to empower our trainers to get better at client acquisition so that they can have thriving careers. And we do see some pushback when we kind of lean into our trainers and ask them to commit to SMART plans and SMART goals. And there's sort of a hesitancy. I just want to train people. It's like, no, but what's your 1-year plan? What's your 5-year plan? How much money do you want to be making in 6 months? And trainers sometimes have to be kind of pushed into thinking about that for the career longevity of that. And it serves them really well once they do, because then they can be very intentional about building their business and building their business in ways that are sustainable for them, both physically and financially.
So do any of your organizations, either now or in the past, have you gone through and engaged with, I guess, your leads? Like the example of like ACSM, like the company I work for, they work with a lot of colleges and universities. You certainly learn a lot in college related to anatomy, physiology, biomechanics, all of the kind of like the multi-syllabic scientific terms, but they don't teach the part of, I mean, yeah, they have some behavior change things, but they don't teach the sales part of it. Like, so how do you start your thing? How do you connect your value that you're bringing as a trainer? Because you certainly bring an expertise in terms of the science, but you still have to show your value into helping somebody meet their goals. Do you engage with kind of like entry points into the career of like, hey, look, we're really looking for you to start teaching more sales? Or do you think you come in and, you know what, as an employer, it's like, we're going to teach you that side? I guess it's like, if that's a key pain point for employers, do you engage with them with kind of educational programs, or, you know, or do you go like, look, this is, I don't know, Francis's House of Fitness, I'm just going to do it on my own and kind of teach you that stuff? I guess it's like, how do you address that?
I think sometimes when they come to us and they have business background and they're becoming personal trainers, they do very well because they're a little bit more bought into just the idea of some of these concepts. But we really like training our trainers in our way of doing sales because they get to speak our language and they get comfortable with the way we like to position things. And there is sort of a way that's unique to our brand. So for us, it's helpful, but they're coming in sometimes with that willingness or that basic understanding of the importance of it. So we have that buy-in. So we're not constantly saying you really should lean in and do this. They get it from the jump and they're really excited to engage and learn.
We do something a little bit similar to that, Geraldine. When somebody goes through our education at the very end, I've sort of crafted for our team a soft sell. So what we found is helping them understand the difference between soft selling the benefits of what they need to upsell at the end, and then having their own sort of hooks. Or in our case, I'm going to have them mention other programming in the 8-hour education. I'm going to have them soft sell, you know, human reformer when they're teaching a bar core exercise. I'm going to help them. And then in the end, I give them the pitch because it's so natural and it's so easy and it aligns with how we've laid up the process. But if I don't do that, I find, in fact, I had an instructor I did payroll for yesterday who didn't get anyone to sign up at the end. We sell a membership at the end of our educations and nobody signed up. out of the ones that were there. And then the same education was taught this weekend, and 75% of the people signed up. So what I know by that is I need to go back and retrain them in that process. But the thing is much like what you guys sell, we know it's valuable. We know it's low cost, high value, and it's an easy sell if they're willing to follow the system. But they wouldn't come up with that system on their own because they're great educators. They're, historically talented speakers and dynamic people, but selling hasn't always been their skill set. So we actually give them the system just like you do.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I mean, we don't actively, train coaches and fitness professionals coming into the Coach 360 community. However, we push out a lot of content surrounding the business of coaching. We have a whole show around and summit around the business of coaching, and there are so many different elements that go into what selling looks like today. It's quite different than what selling looked like when I started my career, 17 years ago. Now, and I know we're going to touch on this in a little bit, but, now selling is, a lot about your brand and, building that personal brand and where that personal brand is able to shine through. Is it through these different, your different social media platforms? Is it in-person community events? That's really kind of driving the sales from what we're seeing, at least with the coaches that we work with is, what does the community feel and experience look like? Because for many of these coaches, as soon as they build community and build brand, whether it's social or in person, or both, that tends to be the driver of their sales, is, that overall brand awareness. So, again, this was not the case when I started. And I think that's why business of coaching, curriculum in education is so very important because it's constantly evolving, right? Like you can put it in a book, but a year from now, it's going to look completely different. So, these are things that, we have to tap into, and we have to constantly, work with these coaches to really help them hone in on that skill.
This is a great segue because I think that's the part I really wanted to get to. I'm going to skip a couple questions because we're getting a little tight on time. These are great conversations, but I really want to understand, and I know this is a very hot topic of building your personal brand. What does that even mean? I think it's just like, I think we hear it, it's a buzzword. And if I don't know what that is, like, what does that mean in your own words? And what's a good example of one? And then I think I want to come back to Kathleen. I want to also build out on the questions, like, what does it mean by when you're talking about that you're selling today, and what does that mean from a social presence side? I'm super interested in that. So let's talk about that personal branding. What do you mean by that?
Oh, I didn't know if you were addressing that one to me. So for building personal brand, it's done, as I mentioned, in various different ways. But, typically, now we're seeing that people will, really identify a niche, whether it's, women's health, whether it's, body inclusivity, hormonal health, overall wellness. I mean, right now, the industry has changed so much, as you all know. It is not about physical and aesthetics. It is about the 360-degree holistic approach to how today's client wants to be addressed. We are a whole person, so we have to treat our clients as such. So what we're seeing right now is people coming forth and being extremely transparent in who they are, their own struggles. And it seems as though the more that these coaches share, the more that they develop an online social presence and a brand that resonates, because they are sharing. That share allows them to connect with thousands, if not millions, of people who are following them. And of course, building a brand is not just about in person anymore. We can now train and coach people all around the world. We are not limited by borders because of social media and because of, the rise in Zoom training and coaching. So people really have the opportunity to build and hone in on what that brand is and amplify it across social platforms, tell their story, share that content out, and they will draw in the right people. So, that's really something that we're seeing, is, this authenticity that is, forever on the rise. And it seems to be even more so now. And, how are they, creating that niche to, really create a community of like-minded individuals that can coach, share, to others and bring in more people into that net.
Yeah. I just add to that. I think nowadays, as a trainer or even as an instructor, if your current goal for the next 1 to 5 years is to build your brand, say within EOS, or to be well known that people are going to Coach 360 and wanting to hire you, right? Like if that's your goal, you do have to focus on telling the story of who you are in a really authentic way. And I always say to trainers and instructors, you have to create a muse for who you're talking to and be specific. So people who are doing really well at personal branding don't go outside of the lines of who they are. So I'll give you an example. I'll even use myself as an example because my daughter makes fun of it so much. But my muse is a 45 to 60-year-old mom, right? Someone who's parenting right now, a fit pro, because my audience is fitness professionals. I am somebody who is going to tell the story of my female friendships. I'm going to tell the story of how life, children, and home have to come together. And I know that. So when you go to my socials, you're not going to see things out of the blue. You're really going to see fitness. You're going to see my daughter. You're going to see that I love to go and spend time with friends and travel. But you're not going to see me. I'm not going to get on and I'm not going to get on and be like, I'm, so sad about this, or I'm not going to cuss. I'm not going to talk about politics. You will never catch me on my socials talking about politics, because I don't believe that that's what my muses want to hear from me. If I really want them to come to me and trust me as a fitness professional and as somebody that's going to lead them in education, I know where I need to be on social media. So I'm really cautious, and I think the best thing I can suggest for people is for them to figure out who their muse is, so that every time you post something, every time you share something, that you're continuing to talk to that muse. And if you're a personal trainer, if you're somebody who's serving people who are newer to exercise or active agers, create the muse and talk to them. And then I guess my other perspective, kind of going back to what we talked about earlier, is that if you look at casting, or you look at how we hire talent for on-air work, we look for somebody who understands what segment will like them and also who won't like them. And in our industry, you have to be polarizing to be popular, period. A bland instructor, a bland trainer, bland does not work. Your persona, whether you're the cheerleader or the magician, and there's a study on all the personalities that kind of coexist in a business, whoever you are, you have to be that person unapologetically, because you will draw in an audience. You may not be for everybody, but you will draw in an audience. And I was at a Soul Cycle class this week, and this guy says, by the way, I'm here. There's 80 of you. How many of you are new to me? We all, like 5 of us, raise our hand, and goes, all right, I'm not for everyone, but let's go. Yes. And I loved him. So again, just knowing who your audience is so important in building a personal brand.
Yeah, I echo all of that 100%. I do think the authenticity piece and the willingness to share, I mean, to Trisha's point, not that you have to be sobbing and open, but I think there is power in letting your community know your journey, whatever that was, if it was a weight loss journey or a learning to accept your body as it is, and whatever your journey is. Most of our audience don't think that we ever had these problems. And when they see someone who looks fit, especially, they're intimidated and think, well, you don't know what it is to have to struggle with your weight, or you never had any issues with body image. And so I think when you bring those things out and they think this person is doing the work, has done the work, and came out on the other side, it's really inspiring. And then if you combine that with really good content where you're showing up pretty much every day and giving them a little nugget that they can use, a little thing they can take with them, or some inspiration or hope, that's powerful stuff. And you will build your community, and they will find you, and they'll find each other. It gets very sticky very quickly.
All right, so I'm gonna ask the tough question for you all. There's two things that top of my mind is how do you cut through the noise of influencers? And then the second one, and maybe because this is a personal thing for me, I have two daughters. They're teenagers. And to me, is when you're looking at the fitness industry, when you're looking at these influencers, a lot of them are dressing a certain way. How do you deal with that, especially with like rising professionals? In one is your authentic self is one. You're developing kind of your journey of how you're connecting, and you feel you're pulled in different directions because of the way the influencers are. And they may be spreading misinformation, things like that. So how do you cut through that noise and really kind of showcase who you are as a professional?
I'll start. I think you have to be comfortable. It's not necessarily about numbers, and it's not necessarily about being, wide and narrow. You really want to be narrow and deep. So it's better to have fewer highly engaged followers or people that are in your community who really get you versus trying to be, to Trisha's point earlier, all things to all people, because you won't be. And there is some power, as she said, in being a little bit polarizing. So I do think trying to stay true to yourself and not worrying so much about what your competition's doing and showing up again consistently. There's so many influencers that are really successful and their numbers aren't necessarily huge, but then you look at the products they're selling or the other parts of their work and they're doing tremendously well on a variety of fronts. It's because they're true to their audience, true to themselves, and they just kind of ignore the other stuff because there's always going to be someone doing something to get attention that's over the top. And that's the other thing I will also say. Your employers, your potential employers are looking at your social media. They are. So when they see things on there that don't look appropriate, that would be a poor reflection on the brand, that impacts the decision of whether or not they're going to move forward with you. So it's something to really take a look back. And if you have some stuff going on in high school and college, that's cool. But maybe time to start to clean up your social media image so that you really present well when you go out in the job market.
Yeah, and just to tag on to that, influencers typically are showcasing themselves. And real coaches are showcasing their results and their clients' results. So I think, if you want to be a credible creator coach on a social platform, building a community, you need to highlight things that are outside of aesthetics, highlight improvements in confidence, highlight strength, highlight mobility, and showcase those results, showcase real client testimonials. Listen, we're in an industry where people are sexy, and that's not going away. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think to be taken seriously, you need to focus on the real results that your clients are getting and the people who want to work with you, because ultimately others will see that those clients had results with you as a coach or trainer, and they're going to want to work with you too. So I would say, influencers in general are about showing themselves, and coaches are about building careers and about building community.
Love that.
Beautiful thing about that, Kathleen, is the coaches have a long-term pathway, right? Because showing yourself, like as you evolve and change, or what if you do evolve and change, right? If your body type changes, or you get pregnant, or you get older, God forbid, that influence could shift in that career pathway now ends. But if you're a true coach, like you were describing, now you get to evolve as a human because of what's up here and what you're providing in the services versus what they're seeing. So I think that's amazing. I also have to add, Francis, to your question about how to handle, teenagers and that conversation. I have to say, I'm actually optimistic. I hate to say it, but I'm optimistic. I teach at True Fusion here, just down the street here in Seattle, and I teach a lot of University of Washington students and a lot of high school students. And I am really optimistic about how they see their bodies right now. I'm just blown away. They come in no matter what shape or what fitness level they are. They come in wearing what they want to wear, and and I don't know why it inspires me so much, but it's like a confidence thing that I haven't ever seen in a generation, including myself. Like I walk into the class and I'm like covered head to toe because I'm like, well, all these things. And all of a sudden I'm like, screw that. The 20-year-old is confident. Why can't I be? So I'm optimistic about that. And I don't deny that my daughter's influenced at 14 by things she sees, but I also am in the car listening to the conversation she's having. And I think this generation, I mean, she calls me out. My mom complimented her the other day she said something like, you have such a great figure. And my daughter goes, Grandma, please don't talk about my figure. I want to make sure you're not saying that to other people because that could feel really hurtful to. And I was like, so I'm optimistic. And part of that is, just the lens I'm seeing life through. So I know that it has its negative effects. And if I could say anything, I would minimize your child's access to socials. I would be looking at your kids' communication. I'm on Snapchat to do one thing and one thing only, which is to interact and see what my daughter's doing. And I know exactly who she follows. I go through her Instagram account. It is a relationship we have. I pay for it. I get to do all of the above. And if she wants to argue with that, she can go pay for her own phone, and that's not going to happen.
I just need to do a quick time check. We're about 15 minutes to the end. So these conversations are absolutely incredible. For the audience, ask your questions. Like this is your time to interact with our folks here on this panel. I do want to kind of go into, and maybe I guess it's like for me selfishly now, I get to ask another question. The last one, I think for me, at least for my questions, when we're thinking about, gosh, the words are keep popping up: authenticity, be your authentic self, developing a sense of culture within the company, developing a sense of community, and developing those types of relationships in your professional growth. Who do you use to inspire you to continue to grow? Like, do you seek mentors yourself? Or do you just kind of like, I think I have an idea, and you just kind of like henpeck at other kind of educational things? How do you, as a person, like continue to grow and thrive as a professional?
I'll take it. It's interesting because now 30 years in, there's not that many people that are older than me in the industry. So it's getting to a point where it's really kind of cool because so many of my now mentors in different ways are considerably younger than me, kind of to the point that Trisha made, where I'll see something in younger generations. I'm like, wow, that is so inspiring. They own their body shape and they're confident in their skin. And there's just so many people that I've come across in this industry over the last 10 years that really inspire me. And then I seek them out and we become friends, and I learn from them their worldview and who they read and who they follow. And it takes me down different paths, but it's kind of cool to have some of your mentors be, 20 years younger than you.
And I guess I'll dive in next. I actually have a life coach, and I consider him to be my mentor. I think it's always important. I'm at this different phase in my life now too, where, I'm an entrepreneur. I have a startup. So there is a lot of imposter syndrome that goes on in my head, and these lies that I tell myself, because I feel like I should be in a certain place. And I know that this spans across like any role within the industry or, any other industry. Is, imposter syndrome is real. And especially as a woman, it has, played a part in my development throughout my career in this industry. And having a coach to help me kind of untangle these mistruths about myself has really helped to, to get me to move forward in the right direction. So I do think, whether you find a mentor in a coach or a colleague, I mean, in terms of colleagues, I surround myself with hype people. Energy vampires have no room in my life. So I like to be around people who lift me up. And I consider, that very small, close group of industry friends and, just personal friends, I consider them all to be mentors in some respect. And I hope that, I can, potentially be a mentor to them in some way, whether it's showing them courage or showing them, overcoming obstacles. I hope that, to continue to be able to surround myself with people that can teach me something. So yes, I think at any stage in your career, finding mentors that, bring something valuable, to the relationship, is an important thing. And, people should constantly seek out, coaching and mentorship professionally and personally, really.
All of that. And I know you mentor a lot of people, actually. I have kind of over the years realized that it's the friends of mine outside of the fitness industry that I'm now leaning on the most for mentorship. So, one of my best guy friends who's not in the industry owns a software company, and I'm constantly learning from his process and asking him questions. I have, friends that work at Amazon, of course, because I live here in Seattle. I have friends that are entrepreneurs in the nail lacquer business. And what I've found is having a group of friends that aren't in this industry, that are all really as passionate about what they do as I am about what I do, allows us to have really good conversations. And when something comes up, if it's an HR question or it's something like that, I can call. I know in my Rolodex of good pals, I have people that I can ask for support. And I have friends that are going to push me and not allow me to take take less than what I deserve. So when I get offered a contract, I don't go to somebody in the industry and say, hey, what do you think of this? I know I'm going to my friend who is way high up in HR at Amazon, and she's going to say, no, absolutely not. That is unacceptable. I don't care what your industry says. That's not okay. So again, it's just finding the people in my life that are going to push me and inspire me. And then, of course, still leaning on people like Carrie and some wonderful people.
So here's the, I'm going to change gears a little bit. What niche do you think is going to be something the next 3 to 5 years that is on the horizon? You're saying, like, we think this area is going to take off. What is it? And how are you preparing for it?
I mean, we're already seeing, women's health, finally, after so much time, take a front seat to this industry. Women's health has been just a mystery to so many coaches and their clients for so long, because all of the studies that have been done were data that came from men. So now we're finally leaning into, all right, let's actually get women into these studies so that we can have data to develop programs that are catered to the unique challenges that women face throughout their life. Prenatal, postnatal, perimenopause, menopause, all of these things, and how we should be training our clients when they are about to start their cycle. I mean, these are things that, like, 17 years ago, people would, freak out. You talk about period, and that was just a no-go. So I just think that women's health is going to continue to be on the forefront. And if people and coaches don't know how to coach women throughout this, these different stages in their life, they're really missing 50% of, their key core population, their audience, right? So I think we're going to continue to see coaches niche down and leverage technology to help them, with women's health, because we can't just, rely on, women saying how they feel a certain day. While that's important, we have to look at data, from all of the wearables, all of this data that's coming, data overload, right? That most, the average bear is not going to know how to demystify. Coaches need to be able to take that data and take the way that a woman feels during a certain point in their life and actually create actionable insights to craft a customized program. So I really believe that we're going to continue to see that rise. And we're seeing it all over the industry right now, all sorts of funding going to women, women's health programs and products and services, and a increased focus on everyone, not just women coaches, men coaches as well. How are they training their clientele, that fall into that are women? So I think that that's going to continue to be on the rise, just from what I'm seeing.
I would add on to that 100%, everything that Kathleen just said. And I think in general, also active aging, male and female, is a huge opportunity. we're now redefining what aging looks like. 60 used to be very, very old. I'm about to turn 61, so I will tell you, I do not feel that it's very, very old. You know, I'm in classes with people who are in their 20s, and we're a new generation, so we're going to need people to coach and help us and guide us to be our best versions, because we don't want to slow down. We're not getting into walkers. We are doing everything we can to live as vitally and fully for as long as possible. So this idea of health span and how do we navigate it? I think any coach who's leaning into that and supporting that holistically, you know, everything, nutrition, fitness, the whole 360 of that, I think is going to be well positioned for the future.
I second and third all of what they've just said. I call it athletic aging. And I think one of the big gaps right now, and I'm super biased because I wrote a program for this gap, but I hope 1,000 people write programming for this gap because I think it's an endless opportunity. But there is a huge gap between, hey, I'm in a group fitness room, killing it, doing Tabata, kickboxing, you know, powerlifting, you know, there's a huge gap between there in time and chair fitness. And nothing wrong with either one of those things, but we have the widest opportunity. 41% of the population is 45 to 65 right now. And this is really the first generation that grew up in a group fitness room or grew up at the gym. And we're not serving up content in the group fitness room to help them. And so that's, I wrote a program called Everflex with Pete McCall. And that was sort of our goal, was to say, like, listen, we are not aging, we're athletically aging. And here's, we know what you want it, and we're going to serve it up just like that. And we're not afraid to tell the story. Like, you're getting older and you're perimenopause and you're in menopause, and we're going to say the words and menopause or whatever we want to utilize. But we're going to give them what they need right now and stop ignoring the largest potential market share. And then the one last thing I'd say is I just think there's such an opportunity for personal trainers to be working with physicians in some capacity and being referred the GLP clients to them. I think the idea that we have such a high percentage of the population on medication or assistance in this way is just a great opportunity, because we are now hearing more and more they will have to come off of it, or they might want to come off it. So how do we, if they weren't ready to come into the gym before they went on it, because maybe there was insecurity, maybe there was emotional holdbacks. Now with these people who have gone on something, they feel successful, but maybe they don't want to stay on it, or maybe they need something to help them on the physical side, the fitness side, come halfway. And I think the easier we can make it for doctors to refer to clients and to trusted personal trainers, there's endless, first of all, there's endless revenue there, and there's endless opportunity to really help people.
Awesome. We know we're at the last 2 minutes. I have one more question. We might have to do a whole session on your network as your net worth. So we'll do that next time. I think that would be an awesome kind of like, how do you build those bridges between you and healthcare? I guess the one question we did come in just right now is, what advice would you give to someone looking to start a personal training career later in life, both in terms of overcoming industry stereotypes and building a client base that values life experience as much as physical experience, expertise?
I'll just say that I think if you're really doing the work as a professional, bringing value, and you're true to yourself, you know, the customer that you serve, the client, the ideal avatar, as Trish said, you can really serve at any age. And it's really more about, kind of like Kathleen said, imposter syndrome. It's more you're sometimes worrying about how you're perceived versus just going out there and being yourself. You're not going to be everybody's favorite flavor. That's okay. You'll find your people who need your message and will benefit from your help.
For sure.
I would just say, gosh, I'm trying to think of the best piece of advice. For me, it would be know your goals, know where you want to be in 1 and 5 years, and decide whether you will always be, whether you're going to live in an hourly rate phase for your career path, or are you going to look to find passive revenue where you're making money in your sleep? Because if you don't have your eye on that space, you can wake up 5 years later and say, gosh, the only time I make money is when I'm physically moving my body in that space. And that can get really difficult very quickly. So knowing your goal and not just knowing it, but leading to that pathway, and then not being afraid to put the hours in. There's nothing wrong with a trainer who's training 4 and 8 hours a day to really learn the skill, and you get good fast, but it takes hours and hours and hours to get good at something.
I know we're out of time, but Kathleen, I'd love for you to have the last word.
Yeah, the last piece of advice I give to coaches and trainers, and I have to steal this from my buddy and mentor Todd Durkin, is to show up and be in the room. And I know Trisha is so good at that. I feel like every time I'm at an event, she's there too. But I have to tell you, showing up and being in the room and going to these different events and just meeting people and being genuinely interested has really been the foundation of my 17-year career in this industry.
Awesome. Thank you, friends. I feel like this is only a part one of a couple part series. The topic has just been incredible. We'll probably only got about half the questions to them, but it's been absolutely incredible. So hopefully we can do this again. I'd like to thank you all as panelists and Coach 360 for being our premier sponsor for our partner of US Reps. Thank you so much for joining today's webinar. I look forward to continuing our partnership together and then more education to come.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
So much,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.